I think Jerry Bonkowski has developed a following here in the Tri-Cities with this conversation with me about NASCAR. It's Talladega week, getting away from the bull rings, going to the super speedway. And what's more of a super speedway than Talladega? Not even Daytona, in my opinion. It's nice to have you on for NBCSports.com, one of the better motorsports writers. And Jerry, before I go to, I guess, talking about the race and some of the events this past week with a new driver coming into the circuit and such, or actually an old driver coming into the circuit, I did want to say one of the things that I saw that kind of I thought explained why Mustang is going to be the car Ford is going to run next year was the decision by Ford Motor Company to basically do away with all their cars. In a year or two, they're going to only sell in North America the Mustang and an SUV. I think the Fusion, I believe, which will be redeveloped as well. And so it now becomes obvious, that's why you changed the pony car. I see. But do you see any impact that could have in the influence of Ford's success moving forward in NASCAR racing if the company becomes more of a pickup truck, more of a GMC and less of a Chevy competitor? What are your thoughts on that decision, Jerry Bonkowski?
Well, I'll tell you this, Marky. Maybe I'm looking at this from a different point of view, but to me, Ford deciding to just keep the Mustang and then go to the hybrid SUVs, the regular SUVs, the pickup trucks exclusively in North America, to me is really a stroke of genius. It's brilliant. And I'll tell you why. Ford, has been they're all in NASCAR. And they still know that even though NASCAR's had its struggles, they still sell a lot of cars in the dealership. The old adage,
sure,
Sunday buy on Monday. To me, this is a genius move on Ford's part because, at this juncture, I still think that somewhere, maybe in, let's say, 2022, 2023, somewhere down the road, the next 4, 5, 6 years, whatever, you probably will see another car come back. That's my opinion. It's my guess. But, the Mustang has been so good to them in the last couple of years. That's one of the big reasons why NASCAR decided to go with the Mustang and replace the Fusion. Again, this is something that, if you want to have a presence in NASCAR, you have to have the presence in the showroom. And, the Fusion did well, but its time is up. You've got all the other cars that Ford had. Their time, the popularity just wasn't there anymore. So, again, I think it's a brilliant move. And I think that this is going to kind of put Chevy, it's going to put Toyota, and maybe put Dodge on notice that if they, Dodge, if they want to come back, and the rumor is that they'll come back in 2020. If they do come back, will they just strictly have essentially the Challenger and maybe the Charger and get rid of all their other cars and just have the SUVs and things like that? Sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's what I wanted to.
I have long-winded questions, so that's no problem there. No, but I guess this, to me, it was just major change in the automotive industry and such. And my first thought was, one of remorse. The great Ford cars. The distinctive taillights that they had in days of yore. And, the Fusion is the new Torino, and wasn't the Torino a great, you wanted the Grand Torino as much as you wanted, let's say, depending on your taste and all this, a Mustang back in the day. Certainly in the 70s, a lot of people thought that the Grand Torino was sportier than the Mustang too and such. So I just saw that and I was thinking, boy, there's so many great cars, and how many people drove an Escort or something like that to get you there? You know what I mean? No, the Escort isn't going to be a NASCAR or anything like that, but it's an iconic, brand that introduced you to driving, much like, the Falcon was of years gone by, the Fairlane, what have you. And the LTD, I just thought it was, it was a sad day to me to see those great Ford cars. Really, just for the Mustang, that's the only one that's going to be kept. And I know that stock cars, except for maybe, aerodynamics or something, that's not a real Mustang out there. I get that. But, boy, this could change things. Now, that being said, we've got Talladega. The pony car this year has only won the one race, the Daytona 500. So, I mean, could you see next year possibly pony cars doing well in the super speedway and the sedans doing well in the bull ring? I mean, do you think that that's where we're going in the future of NASCAR?
I think the evolution is definitely still, a work in progress. I mean, you mentioned about how the pony car, the Chevy Camaro, won at Daytona and has not won since then. I get that, and you have to remember that a lot of the teams are still struggling with the adapting to the Camaro, and I'm kind of surprised, actually, to be honest with you, that has occurred. I mean, look at Hendrick Motorsports. Now, they've come on quite a bit over here the last couple of races, but early on after Daytona, they seem to really be struggling. It seemed like they were at a loss there for a while, but they're starting to come back. And again, this is something that's very natural to NASCAR. When you bring in a new body style or a new car, it's going to take a while to get used to. There's a lot of nuances there and a lot of changes. I mean, people think that all the cars are the same and that Ford is a Chevy, Chevy's a Toyota. No, it's not the case. So there's obviously a learning process, a learning curve, if you will. And I think that by next year you're going to be seeing the Chevy doing a lot more. And I'm not ruling them out getting several more wins this year. I mean, we're through 13 races, I think.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And I'm not ruling that out by any stretch. And I think that the Ford Mustang is going to win its share of races. And now the question is, what does Toyota do? I mean, they really don't have a pony car type of car. Do they stay, with the Camry, or do they, start looking at possibly developing a new car, or do they change the style of the Camry? There's all kinds of question marks about that. And like I said a moment ago, what about Dodge? Are they going to come in? Will there be any other potential new manufacturers? Maybe like a Honda or something like that. So, it just, we've seen this, over the last 65 years of NASCAR, that when a new body style comes in, there will be a learning curve. Like I said, that teams will be slow in adapting to it, but once they figure it out, they're going to be fine.
Well, I'm going to throw a flip side to that. Could you see actually maybe it just be Ford and Chevy with the Mustangs and the Camaros? Because, when Toyota came in, they were the outsider. What's this Japanese car company doing in our American sport? What's that all about? And I felt that too. And so I'm curious if this could now go to, in your opinion, maybe just pony cars, just the great American rivalry of Ford versus Chevy, and, to try to get back to that distinctly American type of racing, despite all of, Toyota's success and investment in NASCAR. Could you possibly see something like that coming up on the horizon?
Well, let me make sure I got this right. I understand you clearly. Are you saying that Toyota would not be around anymore?
I'm just curious if this could be a direction. I felt it years ago when Toyota came in. I was like, what are they doing in our American sport? And I had a problem with it. I'll be honest with you. Domestic car guy, that sort of thing. Now, maybe I'm a Neanderthal, but my question is that could this be a venture to try to get it to nothing but American car companies and pony cars on the NASCAR circuit? That's my question.
No, I don't see that, because I think that Toyota has so much investment for not just yearly, but since they came into NASCAR back in, what was it, when they brought the trucks in? I want to say, what was it, 2000, I think it was. So I mean, they've had almost 2 decades in the sport, starting with the trucks, and then of course eventually moving to the Cup and the Xfinity Series. So I don't see Toyota walking away. I mean, NASCAR has proven to be a very good and strong marketing vehicle for Toyota. And I understand what you're saying about back in the day when they first came into the Cup Series, there was a lot of consternation that it was a quote unquote Japanese car company, but the reality is they're building more Toyotas in the U.S. now than they are building in Japan. I'm pretty sure about that. So it has become a American company with the manufacturing of all the cars here in the States. I mean, I'm not a Toyota guy by any stretch, but to buy a Toyota, you're going to get an American product if you're in the U.S. or I think even also Canada. You're not going to get a car from Japan rather. So it's become an American product. But like I said, if the introduction
Sure, sure.
But that, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What?
No, I just said sure. No, I just, it's a head bob, yeah.
Right. So, it's overdue. I mean, it's overdue to be changed. It's overdue to be replaced. I'll give you here's one other quick anecdote to that. Back when the rumors were going that Toyota was going to come into the Cup Series, Camry actually wasn't the number one name that was being mentioned. The number one name that was being mentioned was the Solara, their sportier car, and that obviously didn't last very long. So, but that's the point I'm making is that if Chevy and Ford are going to duke it out with pony cars, Toyota certainly could go ahead and keep the Camry, but I think that to be competitive, to draw people into the showroom, they're going to have to come up with more of a sporty car to match the Mustang and the Camaro.
I could see that. That's an exciting time, I guess. And I know, you can even say, hey, how many, Fords and Chevys now are even made in the United States? I mean, there's the plant in Oshawa, Canada, makes so many Chevys and such. But, I get tradition, history, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, you understand where we're going with that. And a lot of people still believe that. And, I remember my grandfather who would never, ever consider, buying a Japanese car. He would help you look at them. When his daughters bought them, that was fine. But he himself, he was not going to be buying anything but a traditional domestic vehicle. And,
Mark, and I don't mean this in a derogatory form, but I mean, hear what I'm saying.
Sure.
NASCAR obviously wants to build a new audience, a future audience. They want to get young people involved in sport. What do I shouldn't say most, but does a large number of young people today drive? They drive imported cars. They drive the Hondas.
Oh, sure.
So, I get what old-time NASCAR fans feel about felt, and they still do feel, some of them, about the imports coming in. But from a matter of economic survival and a survival of the sport, NASCAR has to embrace the import manufacturers from Japan, or if there's manufacturers, let's say like a BMW were to come in, something like that. So it makes I see where you're coming from, but that, I think, to me, that thinking has to be put aside, I think, in favor of the young people, the type of cars they're driving, and what's going to draw them in. I mean, a good example, a good friend of mine, he's in the business, but I'm making the point here. He's 28 years old. He had a 97 Honda Accord. He finally traded in last year. He got himself a brand new 2018 Accord. I'm sorry, no, he didn't get an Accord. He got a it wasn't an Accord. That's right. So, I'm sorry, he got a Honda Civic. So, the point is that here's a millennial. He got a business, but that's beside the point. But he's a guy who likes racing, and there's a lot of people like him who drive the import cars. And if NASCAR is going to stick strictly to the Fords and the Chevys, they're not going to draw in a lot of new fans. They have to go in that direction. And Toyota's been one of the leaders in terms of bringing in younger people to be fans of NASCAR. And I think that if you see more manufacturers come in, again, we talked about Dodge a little while ago. I still think Honda's going to make a presence sooner rather than later. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe we see a Mercedes or maybe even a BMW. I think that NASCAR, to get back to where it used to be at, it has to bring in more manufacturers. And I think you're going to see that.
Interesting point right there, and I can't really disagree with that. I mean, but we're talking to Jerry Bonkowski, NBCSports.com. The other big story in NASCAR this week, though, was Matt Kenseth, and he is returning, going to be sharing time with Trevor Bayne in the number 6 Ford. What does Trevor Bayne think about this?
Good question. This is strictly, solely my opinion. Trevor is a good guy. He's a good personality. He's good for the sport. He's tried everything. He wins the Daytona 500 back in, 2011. But I think he'd be one of the first people to admit that the level of success that he had hoped for and anticipated really hasn't played out that well. And so I think that, situation that they've got some sponsorship to back Kenseth. And remember, Roush used to be at one point there were a 5-car team before the NASCAR put the 4-car limit, and now they're down to a couple cars. So I think that you have to make they have to make a decision for the sponsor. The sponsor wanted a guy like Kenseth. They called Kenseth up and they said, "Hey, you want to come back to race?" And he said, "Yeah." And unfortunately, it kind of cuts Trevor Bayne's schedule down to basically a half a season now in terms of number of races. But what does that mean for the future for Trevor? He could potentially go back to the Nationwide Series. Xfinity Series rather, and be full time there because obviously, Roush Fenway Racing has always had a good Xfinity program. I don't know what his contract status is. I'm not sure if he's the last year of his contract with the Roush for a Cup car or not. He could go somewhere else. I mean, there's a lot of different balls up in the air right now. So I guess we're going to see where all this kind of plays out. Now, that being said, a lot of people are saying, well, how long is Kenseth going to stay? Is he going to stick around for another year or 2 or 3 or 4? He's 40, I want to say he's 45, I think.
46, actually, but yeah.
Okay. So, definitely you see him this year. I think he comes back for one more full year next year. I think he ends up after next season. But, this was an opportunity that he, I don't know if he actually pursued this opportunity, because when he said at the end of last year he didn't know if he was going to come back or not. He just kind of left his options open. So Roush Fenway came after him, essentially brought him back home where he started at his tough career. And, I think they're going to leave it up to him to decide how much more he wants to race. It could be that he ends after this season. He may have gotten the final part of it out of his system, if you will. Or he may stick around for 2019, maybe even 2020. But I honestly don't see him going past 2020, Marky. I think that Matt still has, he can still win races. Obviously, he cannot win a championship this year coming in so late.
Mm-hmm.
But, there's a potential maybe to win a championship next year. And, Roush could do a really good job of building not only a marketing program, but a performance program around Matt. And, he's certainly good with, what he knows about race cars. And I think, this is a win-win for everybody, except maybe for Trevor Bayne. But I think Trevor will wind up being, okay. I mean, he's still young. He's, 27, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still got a good, long career ahead of him. He just may not necessarily be with the Roush organization. And if that's the case, he'd be one of many drivers that had similar situations. Look at Kyle Busch. He was at Hendrick, and they decided that, when Dale Earnhardt Jr. decided to come over, Kyle went away. Kyle had to go somewhere else. So it's not unusual. We've seen it many, many times in the sport. But I think that, this is good for Kenseth. It's good for Roush Fenway. It's good for NASCAR. It's good for Kenseth's fans. May not be good for Trevor, but I think down the road, I think he'll be okay.
Well, I compare it. I say it's NASCAR's version of the St. Louis Rams moving back to Los Angeles. Right. You're going back to Roush Fenway where you've had success in the past, and over here is Trevor Bayne as poor old St. Louis. What about me? Hey, and all that. But the one thing I did want to ask is, I've seen NASCAR put so much emphasis into the younger drivers. And I understand that, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily sure younger drivers brings in, say, the millennial fan. I think successful drivers bring in the fan. I'm thinking when I'm a little boy, I rooted for Bobby Allison. He'd been on the track for how many years? I mean, I wasn't, going behind Dale Earnhardt, who was coming into NASCAR at the time. Who's he? I wanted somebody established. Kenseth is someone who's established, and although he's not a Bobby Allison or somebody like that, he's somebody that is a brand of familiarity, a brand of success, that sort of thing. Could you see, it seemed like so much emphasis in younger drivers. Could you see now possibly more Kenseths, more drivers staying around a little bit longer than what we've seen in recent years? Could this be the start of a trend?
No, I don't think so at all. I think if anything, this is just Matt, essentially finishing what he wanted to start, and he wasn't able to do that with Joe Gibbs Racing because he was replaced by Eric Jones this year. So, he did not go out on his own terms. This allows him to go out on his own terms, whether at the end of this season, next year, whatever the case may be. But, to your point about the younger drivers, if you're a young millennial, let's just say between between 15 and 30, let's just say. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you going to identify with more? Are you going to identify with a Kevin Harvick who's over, 41, I think he is, or a Jimmy Johnson who's close to, I think he's 40 now, Matt Kenseth who's 46, or are you going to identify with the guy, let's say like a Chase Elliott who's, 25, 26 years old, a Ryan Blaney who's 24, 25. You're going to identify with more of the younger guys. Yes, they are not as successful early on as maybe, let's say, a Bobby Ellison was early in his career, or other, drivers like a David Pearson or somebody early in their career, Richard Petty early in their career. But the point I'm making is, Marky, is that, going forward, NASCAR is selling these young guys. That's who they're promoting.
Yeah.
Who want to make the face sport for the future, because they don't have Dale Jr. anymore. And that's a brilliant move, in my opinion, that they're going that route. And, the way I guess in conclusion, the way I see this is that if you're a young person from 15 to 30, as I mentioned, and you come into the sport, yeah, you might want to root for a guy who's had success, like a Kyle Busch who's 33, 34, or Kevin Harvick that's 40-ish, or Jimmy Johnson that's 40-ish, or a Matt Kenseth, people like that. But if you have not done so up to this point, and now all of a sudden you decide you want to get into the sport, you're going to go with the younger guys. I don't see how a guy like a Harvick or a Johnson or a Kenseth is going to lure you in now if they hadn't already lured you in, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. That's what I'm getting at.
I guess I look at my little boy sports fandom and being a kid in the City of Champions in 1979 Pittsburgh. And, my guys were Willie Stargell and Terry Bradshaw. Now, they'd been around for, combined by that time, I think 30 years or so. To this day, they're the people that I idolize. That's what brought me in. But, I could say then, and you might laugh at this, what I'm going to say, guys that I grew up with, if you will, would be people like Tony Pena or Johnny Ray. Neither one of them are going to be in a Hall of Fame, but they were, guys that would come up with me as a sports fan. It was the veteran, the establishment. I'm trying to remember the character's name, but in the Bad News Bears, the kid that went up into the tree and wore 44 to be Hank Aaron. In 1976, Aaron brought him, that was what brought that kid into baseball, was Hank Aaron. And, I could see that. I think that that's the guy that you start following sport, that legend. And then maybe it's once you're hooked, you follow the Rookie of the Year. That's my sports philosophy. I don't know if you share it. I don't know if NASCAR shares it, but all I can tell you is I lived it. So that's that point.
No, I think you're saying. I will say this. I still remain, I probably will remain surprised for who knows how long that Dale Jr. retired. I thought for sure he'd be, for essentially a lifer. He'd race until he was 50 at least. And, that has changed the dynamic in the sport substantially. Excuse me, my alarm is going off, and I don't know how to turn this off. There we go. It's changed. It's changed the dynamic in the sport so much, so quickly. I know Dale's working on a book that's going to come out later this year about his career, and primarily about his decision to step away, and a lot of it had to do with concussion and that, and he didn't want to endure another concussion if he had a bad wreck. I get that, and from a health perspective, right on. It was the right choice for him, and if anybody else was in his shoes, they'd probably do the same thing. But at the same time, we don't have Dale Jr. anymore. We don't have Dale Sr. We haven't had him since 2001 when he was tragically killed. So NASCAR, they've got all these great guys, but like I said a moment ago, if you're somebody who is saying, well, maybe I'll give this NASCAR a try, and I'm 20 years old or I'm 25 years old, why didn't you do it before? Why didn't you follow Dale Jr. or why didn't you follow Tony Stewart or Jeff Gordon? So you have to give them drivers they're going to relate to, and typically the number one relation or connection, if you will, is the age. So that's why I know where you're coming from. I remember the Pirates of old, Dave Parker and all those guys. Charger or Challenger rather, or a Ford Mustang, they're going to follow those guys rather than the established veterans, in my opinion.
I'll just say this. If Jimmy Johnson wins an 8th championship, that is going to be a story that crosses over all generational lines. And people of every age are going to want to watch it, have an opinion, either root for it or against it, what have you. I mean, and that's just sort of what I see, the records, that sort of thing. I look at that. Jerry, I look at the clock. I've got all this sort of stuff. Who do you think's going to win Talladega?
I'm going to go with, for lack of a better word, a lesser name. I like guys that may not normally be there. I mean, Michael McDowell seems to do very well at Talladega for whatever reason. I think he could very easily win it. He's in the right place at the right time. Maybe maybe an Eric Jones type. I mean, yeah, you always have to look at Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., et cetera, et cetera. But I always look at Talladega as kind of the race for the other guys. The guys that don't always have the kind of stuff, like David Reagan, or somebody like that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the lesser name to win, to emerge as the winner on Sunday.
Jerry Bonkowski, NBC Sports, our second hour after this. I'm overdue for